Happy
Happy
Navratri.
Navaratri.
Yeah, awesome.
Yes.
See,
Data scientists in Brazil are different from data scientists everywhere else, I would say.
and one important thing that you keep sharing, and I would like to summarize in a one fundamental which I strongly believe is called learn by teaching principle.
There is a phrase from a astrophysicist that I like, Neil deGrasse Tyson, that like some infinities are bigger than other ones. Yes, it was the first. 6 years ago, there were no data science podcasts in Brazil. That same 1 year after that, almost the second one came about. Oh, I woke up today. I want to be a developer advocate. I'm going to learn everything today, and tomorrow I'll be a developer advocate. That's not how this works.
This is going to help me as well because uh,
Yeah, take notes.
of course I'm taking it anyway from Mozilla Firefox,
Nice.
and now I am one of the council member in Mozilla. So that was, but the sad part is this
Mm.
month that program got officially shut off, and we were the
Mm.
last council member, like leadership team. But yeah,
Oh,
great time. I learned a lot. Almost 10 years, I would say that.
I know a few things that I cannot share, and
Okay,
but there are things that I can. And one of the things is
I came for identity conference. I lost my identity and I got my identity. What is the best way to, portray in that way that I lost my identity and it's very important. Hello everyone, welcome to the another episode of TACOS where we'll be talking about community and open source. And one of the smartest minds from the open source and the community ecosystem. Today we have Jessica. Hi Jessica.
I.
So let me just share more about Jessica. So I known Jessica is a part of Auth0 Ambassador program. For me, is like one of the inspirations to be a public speaker. But more to that, when I was going to her profile, she is a seasonal technology enthusiast with a diverse and inspiring journey in the world of data science, developer, and specifically in the developer advocacy, where people talk about, share about that technological journey. For her education background in biomedical informatics, her current role as a senior developer at Okta, Jessica career path is nothing just a short of a remarkable journey. So also she has been a data scientist, a developer, and a co-founder of Pizza de Dados, the podcast show. I hope I pronounced name correctly this time. And a passionate developer for sharing the knowledge about open source, community, technology, a lot of. So today we are going to deep a dive her in a lot of things to know about her and her journey. So let's welcome Jess to Tacos.
Thank you.
And also, since this time in India, it's the festival called Navratri is happening, right? Where every individual come over here, and it's kind of one of the most fascinating festival is happening. Where after 7-8 p.m., people go out and they play one of the dance type, it's which is called Garba, right? And
Nice.
people go out there and people play there. So the people who are listening to this, happy Navaratri to everyone. And yes, if you can pronounce with me as well, happy Navaratri to everyone.
Oh my god, I cannot pronounce that. And I don't want to butcher the language. Teach me.
Try it again. Happy
Happy
Navaratri.
Navaratri?
Yeah, awesome.
Yes.
See, and okay. So one of my favorite question, which I might ask you, or maybe I commented a lot of time. How do you pronounce JSON Web Tokens?
For me, I tend to pronounce them JWT because I'm Brazilian. So English is not my first language. And like when talking to friends that don't speak English as a first language, we realize we
Mhm.
prefer to say JWT. But after joining Auth0 and studying a lot more about JSON Web Tokens, reading the RFC, like the JOT specification, I realized that they are called JOTs. Is written there. Say, oh, JWT JSON Web Tokens called JOTs, which JOT. But I prefer to say JWT. For me, it makes more sense to use the three letters instead of
Yeah,
like calling JOTS.
because
Oh God.
yeah, because I also whenever I pronounce, I used to say JWT only. But a couple of sessions which I heard, one of the previous developer advocate to whom I met in US, so they used to
Mhm.
pronounce that. So
Yeah.
that's the difference, and something that you also highlighted in your talk. That's kind of funny as well, because that's a better way to grab their attention, to let them know, okay, we are going to talk more about JSON Web Tokens, and to keep their attention. We're just going to talk about that, how to grab the attention, where I've seen, so
Yeah.
when I was actually reading about, because through your LinkedIn page, and got to one of the thing which I found, that people, when after a couple of years, when they transit their career, right, so is kind of very I would say very difficult for them, because choose shifting from one field to another field, based on their study of background, or let's say the kind of companies they work for, or kind of stack that work for, kind of categories of, since in technology there are a lot of things out there. But when I've seen, since you started your journey by studying in biomedical informatics, and now you are a senior advocate at Auth0, which is powered by Okta. So just wanted to know, like, I'm continuous in the same field. Like, I studied computer science, and I'm still pursuing the same thing. But
Yeah.
from the biomedical to, completely change, how, how this whole transition journey happened, and I'm sure this must be require a lot of motivation. So I would like to hear that.
Yeah, so it's kind of okay. So this transition actually happened over time for me, and today I can say that. Before I didn't know it. When it was happening, I didn't know it. But like looking back, it's easy to spot like the little things there that say like, oh, maybe this person's going to be a developer advocate in the future if she wants to. So for me, biomedical informatics, first of all, is think of it as half computer science, half healthcare sciences, and where all of those things intersect. So the idea would be that people trained in computer science could speak the language of healthcare practitioners, so doctors, nurses, and everything. So in my course, we had three main areas. One was image processing. So imagine tools for analyzing data from images like MRIs and so on. We had computer systems for healthcare facilities, like all the systems that run in hospitals, in healthcare clinics, and so on. And we had bioinformatics, which was basically data science for biological data. So I actually, when I started my college, I thought I was going to be more in the uh, informatics, like the systems for the healthcare facilities more, because it's more of a think of it as managing the facilities and the needs for the healthcare practitioners, and for them to put in data from the um, people that go there, like the patients. And but actually, throughout my college degree, I diverted into biomedical informatics by analyzing data from like genome and whatnot. In that process, already in college, I already went to a lot of conferences, saw a lot of people giving talks. I was part of the student body council, so I loved organizing events for the students in my class and the classes that were happening. I was a representative of my class for the teachers. So whenever, like, I don't know, we need to reschedule exam in the class, everybody wants to schedule that, the professor didn't want so much, I would be the person that would talk to the professor, say, hey, can we find a better date, kind of situation. I also organized conferences, so we had 1 week every year for the people in the college to learn about people that graduated, like what do you work with, what is your day to day, and then to teach like the students real life scenarios. So all through my college, I already had this participation in sort of a community until I found like the Python community. I started going to the Python community, like a group in my city for meetups and connecting to people and say, oh, there is more to life than just, academics, and more to programming than just programming itself. So I started learning more about how we can use a programming language as a tool, but more than that, how to be part of like a group of people that want to learn programming but are connected by the programming language, but they stay because of the people. So that all of that came together really nicely for me. So my first talk outside of college and college work was at the Python users group meetup, teaching them about using R for analyzing data, because in the Python ecosystem we have a big data science library that was just being like born, which was Pandas. And Pandas was used R as an inspiration to be what it was. But instead of being built by people from statistics, it was built by people from programming, computer science. So all of that kind of got me through figuring out what I wanted to do with my career, sort of, in the sense of I didn't want to be a researcher my whole life. I wanted to have practical knowledge and working at a company and expand my horizons around using technology to do something else. So having that kind of conversations with people from the community kind of helped on that. So I graduated in biomedical informatics, but I also had a lot of experience in learning from different languages, different communities. I went to Java meetups. I went to Java conferences. I went to Python conferences. I went to biomedical informatics specific conferences. I went to pharmaceutical conferences to learn more about the things that I was seeing when I was studying, and to learn more about how you can practice what you learn into like real life case scenarios. And in the meantime, in my free time, I also would be part of the community and share what I learned with the community. So like I was basically learning Python to use in one of my classes, and my graduating thesis was in Python with natural language processing and tweets data, which was not good, by the way. Speaking of text, is one of the hardest ones for you to use because it's so short. It's very, people communicate very differently in Twitter than they do in like journal pieces and newspapers and whatnot, which most models were trained on that. And I started like sharing the little bits and pieces of Python I was learning on my free time and while I was researching things with that community. So kind of like from biomedical informatics, I graduated, but I never practiced biomedical informatics in a hospital or a company that did that. I went directly into using Python for data analysis in an open source project back in Brazil called Serenata de Amor, which would analyze open data from the government to find unlawful expenses or suspicious expenses and report that to the government so that the money could be brought back to the coffers from the country. So basically, I did biomedical informatics for graduation, but I used the knowledge of data analysis in different scenarios from them on. So in Brazil, that's what you call a data scientist. But data scientists in Brazil are different from data scientists everywhere else. I would say we wear a lot of hats. So we do data science, we do data engineering, we do machine learning engineering, we do some developer and DevOps work, depending on where you work. So I work with data science, but I had this whole other scenario around knowing how to do unit tests that most data scientists do not know how to do, knowing how to deploy to production, knowing what an API was, how to develop an API, how to test an API, document an API, and those kind of skills that were more complementary to my work. And then eventually, throughout all of the jobs that I had, that was data scientist or data related, I continued to do talks. I had a podcast. I write on my blog to share the knowledge, because for me, part of learning is actually sharing what I know. If I know how to explain something to somebody, it means that I really know that subject. So that's part of my process, like the ultimate test. Did I understand what I was studying, or did I understand what I was learning about? And so I shared the blog. actually started as a note-taking device because my memory sucks. So I needed somewhere to put the information that I learned how to solve a given problem, and then I could find it easy later. And after that became like what it is today. So I kind of started like sharing these bits and pieces of knowledge and going to conferences and apply for cover papers. And then eventually I decided to make a change in my career where I would teach more than just do my day-to-day job. So my day-to-day, I wanted to change a little bit. I wanted to continue doing data science if I could, but I also wanted to like train other data scientists to like onboard faster and deliver content, deliver results faster to the company. So, life does what life does. And eventually I applied for a position at Auth0 for being a developer advocate. And, after going through the process, I got an offer and here I am. I would say very long story. But yeah, that's how I became from biomedical informatics to, developer advocacy. But kind of like everything that I did, looking back, kind of spoke a little bit about being a developer advocate at heart.
Okay. To be very honest, the way you narrated the whole story, that is really amazing because I was completely aligned. And my memory also sucks, to be
I mean, I guess developer advocates more than most people. We know how to find the information we need
exactly.
more than we remember how to do stuff.
Right. And one important thing that you keep sharing, and I would like to summarize in a one fundamental, which I strongly believe is called learn by teaching principle.
Yes.
Right. Because that's the best way. If you really want to learn, you can teach others because that's the best way to share. Because ultimately, when you want to share a knowledge, you try to be, because ultimately you want to teach someone. So you have to well enough, or if you are not well enough, you're trying to well enough. So ultimately, that's a process to give a little push. Right. So there
Yeah.
are two kind of people that strongly believe. One, which, for example, who are self-motivated, others to whom we need to motivate others, right? So I think I kind of a self-motivated because if I always thought if you don't have a problem, try to create a problem for yourself so that you keep on moving and start doing something. Right? I still remember my first international conference was in New Zealand, and I delivered my first Auth0 session over there as
Oh,
a Auth0
nice.
ambassador. Yes, and I was the first batch of Auth0 ambassador.
Oh,
And
that's so cool.
yeah, I work with a lot of folks which they now no more in the program actually who started it, but
Mm-hmm.
I still remember 5 days I got the conference, confirmation for the conference.
Mm-hmm.
2 days I got the visa. One day I got the ticket, and the very fifth day I traveled to New Zealand from India.
Oh my God, that was
And
so fast.
yeah, and I was not sure because the before the prior day my France visa got rejected because I was freelancer, and when you want to travel abroad, you need to give a strong reason that you're going to come back. You
Yeah.
know the whole situation, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of documents there. And I same day I got the invitation for one more conference. I was not I was because any visa process take 15 days of time, right?
Yeah.
I told the organizer that not possible because it's take 15 days a standard process. He
Mm-hmm.
said, "Give me one day." He said, like, I'll talk to some, the governing body, and I- and he next day told me just apply for the visa. I said the agent is not ready to take my application. He said 15 days is. I said still just apply it and give us the application ID.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I told agent that take the file. If it's rejected, I won't blame you, right? It's on. It's okay.
Yeah.
So I got the application next day. I gave it to him. I got my ticket, and the very next day I got email at night that I got my visa got approved and I got the e-visa. Next
Oh,
day
nice.
I
Yeah.
got I traveled to my home. I bought my first bag. From there I headed to airport and I traveled almost 22 hours to state. The only thing I want to highlight over here that if I thought at that moment that like how it's going to done, right? Until unless you part of a process, you never know. And I learned a lot because that was
Yeah.
my first international conference. It was horrible. It was so horrible. But I still, if I look at now, I improved a lot because the organizer told me that once you go home, just check this video of yours, and you will see there how to improve in the next. Because
Yeah.
what next is more important whenever you do anything. Whether you're writing a blog post, you are putting some, even if you, let's say, creating a podcast show, or let's say if you're working professional, what next is very much important, and that's keep you moving because you have a next thought in mind and what you're going to learn next, and then you have keep on mind of what you're going to share next, right?
Yeah.
So something, I could recall those things from what you shared, because uh, one of out of curiosity I want to ask, because when I was a student, I used to do all these activities, but I've seen a lot of students who complained that if they do this kind of activities, they don't get a time, because in the university there are a lot of tasks is there. They have to create, their practicals, exams, lot of
Yeah.
assignments.
Hmm.
How did you manage? Because I heard, and I've still, students came to me and they complained a lot, and they always say one thing: I don't have a time since we have a lot of things. How did you manage to do that? I'm sure you must have submitted a lot of assignments, gone through a lot of practicals. So how did
Yeah.
you balance, and have being a student, right? Because being a student, participating in these activities is again a kind of, you can say, motivation to ourselves, and kind of a passion, I would say, because without passion, nobody can do that. So yes.
Yeah. I would say more than passion is almost like a lack of choice. Like you don't have another choice. You have to
Okay.
get your things figured out. Like in Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
so the system for learning is different from the United States, for example. So instead of paying for college, usually you pay for school and then you go to a free college that is like a federal college. So that's my case. I did go to a state college called Universidade de São Paulo, or São Paulo University. And it was a free college. So I didn't have money to go to a paid college, um, because that is super expensive. One. Second, it didn't have the course that I wanted to do, which was biomedical informatics. And that is, if you get into college, most of the people that do get into college, there is no other option for you to having like a better life for yourself other than graduating. You have to graduate. I did graduate late. So um, instead of like my course was 4 years course for being like a bachelor, and I took 6 years to actually get through the process. And by the end, I was waking up in the library, basically at the college, to study, and I was the last person there to close the library. I also had to choose in between studying and going to meetups, for example. So I wasn't going to many of the meetups by the end of my course. And for me, it was a matter of I either graduate now or I never graduate. And I want to have a diploma because I already put like 6 years of my life into this and I'm going to finish this. So it was not like optional. It wasn't an option for like not getting things done. On the other things, for example, student body council, being part of the community, like founding a Pi Ladies group in the city I was in, those kind of things. Somebody had to do it. Uh, and I would say, lucky enough that at that time I was the person that was there that had time to do it. So when I actually have this conversation with other parties, like people ask us how we do so much or how we do all of the things that we do. And to be honest, the answer is it didn't feel like I had an option to not do these things. Like it needed to be done. Somebody needed to do it. So like I went there and did. Maybe if somebody else did it, it could be better. Maybe if I did it after I learned other things, it could be better. But like, I also follow the done is better than perfect. And once it's done, you can come back and improve after a while or after you learn something new. So I guess my motivation is mostly out of being stubborn and wanting to get things done than anything else. And for winning a better life for myself, like I had to graduate. There was no other option for me. So after 6 years in college, which was a long time, I said, okay, I need to focus on this. And that is not to say that I didn't focus before. I did. My course had classes from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day with the break for lunch. Most classes were like full time. And I still had to get back from college and read papers and study the material and try to learn Java or PHP or MySQL or R for the classes and things like that. And I still had to submit my work and do tests and exams and practical exams and labs and whatnot. So the balance came out of necessity, I would say. So I needed to get things done. Sometimes I would prioritize one class over the other when I was never good at math. So when I was doing calculus, I had to put in more hours into studying calculus than I would doing the biological classes. For me, biology is easier. It gets into my brain easier. I remember things more easily. Mathematics is harder. As stats and statistics for me is I have to like put more effort into learning. So the balance comes from trying to figure out what are the things that I need to focus more on that moment to get a better result. And to this day, there are a few things that I need to study on a daily basis. So right now, I'm trying to learn more about OpenFGA, fine grained authorization, and FGA in general. And passwordless, we have passkeys coming and knocking on the door, which is great. I hate passwords. So I still study to this day. And sometimes I have to choose, should I do a podcast? Should I do a live stream? Do I need to sit down and study something for a talk? I know the content I'm giving on a given talk, like, in an event a few months from now, but I want to have more context of different scenarios. So I need to sit down and separate time for that. So the balance act still exists. And I would say it's different from people to people. For me, it's mostly a matter of focusing on the thing that's going to give me more results right now and the results that I need right now. So yeah, it was hard. Thinking back, I was like, if I had to do it like right now, I don't know if I would have the energy to, do all of the things, be a part of the community, continue to write blog posts from time to time, do talks, and still go to class. Oh my God. Being young helps, I would say.
Agree. And I think I've seen two kind of people who wait for somebody to start and they join it.
Yeah.
And the other kind who don't wait because they don't have options to wait and they just want to start anyways because they don't have options to wait as well, right? And I could feel in the similar scenario. And I think when you have in this kind of scenarios, I think you excel much more compared to the other folks who have a lot of other options to pursue or even a lot of other things to do it. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I was thinking, I would say like it is a different type of challenge, I would say. So when you don't have options, you have to probably rise to the occasion, I would say. Like, you have to figure out. You're going to be a problem solver at heart because you need to problem solve a lot of things in your life. If you were like easier, let's say if I had more options, probably I would come up to be like the person that I am today, but it would take me longer than if the other case would happen. So for example, when I talk about the things I did and do, and people say, how did you do so much? I was like, because I needed to grow fast so that my salary would increase and that I could provide for my parents or something like that. And most people, I realize today, like, don't go through the same kind of stuff that I would go through. So for example, work for me is more than just me buying my PlayStation when I want to play games. Is also about providing for my family. My parents are back in Brazil. I still provide for them. They're still there. I still send them money every now and then. So it's hard. And like those kind of things, I keep thinking, oh, if I had money, what my life would be like. Probably probably, less trouble, more traveling for, Disney and whatnot. Probably I would be a different person, and the growth that I had was condensed in maybe 3 years of my career would probably take me 10 years instead of three. So like learning all the new things that I learned, like I have an advantage that I learn really fast about things. Like my brain makes weird connections. I don't know how that works. It just works. So it kind of helps me because sometimes I need to move really fast and understand things really fast and making these weird connections of, oh, this thing, and remember about something that I learned a few years ago. It helps me remember or learn more things now. But, every person is different. Every challenge for each person is different. And I would say like the pain you're going through now for you is going to be the biggest pain of your entire life. Where like if you don't have that pain, something that might look small for somebody else would be like your biggest pain.
Right.
So like things vary. Like there is a phrase from a astrophysicist that I like, Neil deGrasse Tyson, that like some infinities are bigger than other ones. And it's kind of the same thing. Like the way that you measure what is hard for you is going to be different based on all your past experiences. So yeah, I say like it's a matter of perspective too. Also, there is one thing, like for example, if you feel like you need to do that thing, you're going to find a way to do it.
Right.
So you kind of do it, even though it might not be the best way to do it, even though there are any other ways that you could have done it. But you're going to create the group, you're going to join the community, you're going to give a talk, even though it might be a terrible experience the first time. Speaking of like first time giving a talk at an event, my first time giving a talk at the meetup group, it was supposed to be a 20-minute talk. I gave the content in 13 minutes without pausing for breathing. And I would ask questions of the people because normally when we do the talks in the meetups that I was in, we would be more like a conversation than an actual like lecture. And I would ask questions and I'll wait for the answers because I was like, oh my God, I'm so nervous because I'm talking about this thing. In the end, people's like, oh, it was great because now I understand why pandas chose X, Y, and Z options for their API. It makes sense thinking of how R does it. And I was like, oh, great, awesome. Next time, I need to learn how to breathe through it and improve my pacing. And as I grew more comfortable, that was better. But the first time around, I don't know how I didn't pass out because I didn't breathe for like the 20 minutes. And I was like, blah, 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 blah. It, like, it looked like one big sentence, but it was actually multiple sentences in one. And speaking Portuguese, I speak really fast, more fast than most of my peers back then,
Okay.
Which is kind of funny. So I can say a lot of things in a very short period of time if I want to. So yeah, this is a learning curve, I would say, learning how to share what you want to share and build the things you want to build and be patient with your own self and those kind of things.
Okay. Oh, tell me, for example, let's say if you, because I've seen this problem in the
Mm-hmm.
community. Let's say when you want to start something, have you ever thought about like first thing, what can I get? Because everyone now in this current scenario, because communities 10 years before it's way different than now, right? Because now every product and service has their own community. And since Web3 has evolved, it's created like a massive of interactions where people are more, intuitive about the community, being part of community, and that create a lot of opportunities as well. But the one thing that people often that what can I get? And the second is, let's say we start something and if it didn't work as the output that we might think in our head. So how do you over, because most of the people stop doing that, right? If it didn't work the way it should, as expected. So in your way, I'm sure there might be couple of things which might didn't work. And so yeah, I want to know that.
That's an interesting question. I never thought about it, to be honest. Because okay, so most of the things that I do, let's say like the podcast, the Git study cards, I'm doing them on TikTok now. I did like 3 videos and I haven't done anything else after. Uh, Sometimes it's a matter of adjusting, maybe either adjusting what you are doing to have a different result, or adjusting how you do it, which is a little bit different. So, for example, my idea of learning is through practice. You do it often enough that you can get fast at doing it. So, for example, speed, that is this lady on YouTube called Michelle C. Smith, and she does saber spinning, bow staff spinning. I have weird hobbies and things that I watch on YouTube. So one of them is Michelle C. Smith. And Michelle C. Smith got famous because she basically did a lightsaber routine that Maisie, I forgot her name. It's not Maisie. It's Maisie, the lady that does Rey on Star Wars. I saw it in one of her interviews. I was like, oh my god, this is awesome. And she does this thing in one of her videos, teaching how people can, spin staff and spin lightsabers and whatnot. She says that speed is a byproduct of proficiency. So you do it a lot, it's going to be slow in the beginning, and after you do it a lot, you're going to get speed as a result from doing so often. So, for example, for me, it's the same thing. And I realized that a while ago. I just didn't have like the good phrase for it that Michelle C. Smith did, which was like, when I was never good at writing. My, writing skills were mediocre at best. But somewhere in my career, writing became the way that I would understand the things that I was thinking about and organize my thoughts. In the beginning, it would take me forever to finish, a short blog post. Today, I can write a short blog post in less than 10 minutes, depending on the content, if I already know it really well. I know how to structure the information. I know how to adjust it. And why I use blog posts for this as an example, because blog posts is very easy to spot what is working and what is not working. So, for example, for me, writing more blog posts is actually better. I can see in the analytics dashboard that I have for my blog, I can see how people will come back to your blog more often if you have more content being pushed more frequently. So when I have times that I don't publish enough, my audience drops. And I publish about a lot of subjects, mostly Python and technology, but I publish about a lot of subjects. And my content, if you actually go through the blog post, you're going to see, oh, there is this period of time, it was everything data science in Python and R. And then if you go to this other period of time, this is more like Python and DevOps, and because I was working more with DevOps at that back then. And if you go today, if you open my blog, it's going to be more about Git, because I've been publishing more about complex concepts in Git. So it's easy to spot. So the same way that you get faster at doing something while you know more, spotting what works and what does not work also comes with the proficiency of trying to do things. I normally don't stop doing things unless I really have to. But that's because for me, it's a matter of figuring out what is not working inside of that thing. And maybe I haven't done it enough to figure out what is not working. So why I brought up the videos on TikTok. I dislike tremendously watching myself on camera and on videos, and talking to the camera is not something I like. I like here have a conversation with somebody, it could be one-on-one, it could be 10 people. For me, that's great because I get a feedback from it. But talking to my camera and editing and hearing myself speak on video is torture for me. But I realized that the same thing happened to me when I was writing my blog posts. So recording videos at this point for TikTok is not working. But that's mostly because I don't have the speed that I have with writing blog posts, because I haven't done it enough. So I have this difficulty of spotting when to stop doing things. But it is easier for me to stop on to spot on how to improve something so that the result can be different.
Mhm.
I guess the data scientist mind helps. We do A/B testing, right? A lot, which is called hypothesis tests in data science. So A/B testing for people from computer science is basically have two versions, similar versions of the same thing, and figure out which one has the better result, right? And then, people click more on the button if the button is green instead of purple. Reasons. Sometimes those things happen. So I kind of follow the same approach to the things I'm building. So I started working on a book for Git, and I took maybe 4 6 months writing the first draft of the book. And in the meantime that I was writing the book, I was not publishing anything. I was like, this is not working because I'm not helping anybody by only typing on my computer, me and myself and my computer, and nobody else. So I spotted that problem and I was like, okay, I need to figure out something else. So what can I do that I can reuse the content that I already have and create something new that will help people? So that's when I created the Git study cards. So for me, it's a matter of you having serious conversations, very honest conversations with yourself or with friends if you need friends to do it. Sometimes we need friends. And like think of, what am I doing? What are the reasons this could not be working? So for videos right now is I don't have a time slot for my videos, like my personal ones that I'm doing on TikTok. This is on my personal time. It's not a work thing. It's me doing my thing. I don't have a time on my schedule that I can dedicate to it. So I know I need to fix that. But also, I'm traveling next week to Japan, and then I'm traveling to San Francisco 1 week after Japan. So I'm only going to figure that out in mid-November, probably, or maybe December. So having those difficult conversations and thinking about it, and friends can help, is the way to go. I would say, to spot when things are not working, and maybe stopping is okay. It's something that you need to do. But most of the times for me, it was a matter of adjusting my expectations on what I should be doing about that thing. So for example, I moved out of Brazil. My community of heart is the Pythonistas in Brazil. But being in Canada, the type of support that I can give to Pythonistas in Brazil is different because I'm not there. I'm not going to the meetups anymore. So mostly right now, me wanting to be a part of the events there does not work. So I had to stop trying to do that because it was not something I could do. So I do my best to go into the Telegram groups or the Slack channels or the Discord groups once a week so that I can see, does somebody has any questions? Can I help out? I always try to do that presence online as much as I can. So it was like a matter of, this does not work because I cannot be there in person. So what is this something else that I can do instead? Because most of the times is you carve out time to do a thing. And if it doesn't work, you stop and then you use the time for something else. So maybe in between you stopping and you doing the thing, you can find like a middle ground where you have some adjustment, like a little adjustment that you can do to make it work. And you have to be committed to, okay, how much time am I going to put into this to figure out if it's working or not?
Right.
So for TikTok, I wanted to learn how to edit videos, which I started learning, which is good. I wanted to have a proficiency on recording videos, be able to record maybe 10 videos in an hour because they are supposed to be like 1 minute or less. Because I want to put also on YouTube Shorts, and YouTube Shorts has to be less than a minute. So I should be able to record 10 videos in 1 hour, right? Should be, if I were proficient enough in recording videos, because I'm very critical. Sometimes because of the nature of the short videos, it takes forever for you to figure out the right words to say in the correct order and not repeat yourself and take most of the time that you have. So right now, like recording videos is not working, but it's not working just because I need to make sure to have an appointment on my calendar every week, like I have for live streaming, like I have for answering questions on forums, like I have for replying to emails at work. Everything of mine is very time boxed. And I want to give myself time. Usually 3 months is my window frame for doing something new, and of
Mhm.
actively doing that task and trying
Mhm.
to figure out the best way of doing that task for me.
Mhm.
Um, and then if it's not working, then I'll drop it. But usually, most of the times with me is I have a very hard time of saying no to things and saying I don't want to do this anymore, because for me it's a matter of adjusting stuff. Oh, should I adjust this? Uh, Another example I can give you is the podcast. For example, me, Leticia, and Gustavo were the starters of the podcast. But today is me, Leticia, and Ana Cecilia. Instead, Gustavo is working on other things now. He's on in the podcast anymore, but Ana Cecilia
Mhm.
joined us. And me and Leticia were trying to get things done like ourselves, and it was not working. Really, not working. Like we didn't have the time. Our life is different now than it was 3 years ago, when it wasn't like the podcast is 6 years old. So like 3 years ago, we were in a different spot than we were today. The
Mhm.
pandemic went through, our life changed, priorities changed, and that's normal. So we added Ana Cecilia as a breath of air. Like it gave us extra fuel to continue the podcast. So us having that difficult conversation that this is not working, what we need to do to make it work, or
Mhm.
should we stop this, was really
Mhm.
important. So in that conversation, we came to an agreement that we should not stop it, what we are doing. We should just figure out some other way to do it.
Do it.
So we decided that we wanted to have less episodes in a year, um, record most of them ahead of time so that we can have more time free in our hands so that we can do all the stuff. Like Leticia was working on a book, I was working on courses, I changed jobs, all of those kind of things. So it is a very personal thing, figuring out what is not working.
Mhm.
Stopping might be the answer, but it might not be the answer. You have to have a very honest conversation with yourself as far as capacity goes, as far of adjustments you can make, and so on and so forth. So long story short, that's how I do it. I don't recommend anybody doing this, uh, but that was what works for me. Uh, I have to put like everything into things that I do in order to, if I stop doing them, it's like I tried my absolute best to make this work and it's not working. It's fine. Does that make
I
sense?
think, yeah, of course, of course. The only reason I ask it because the two key things which I going to take away here is self realization is very important,
Yeah.
because the moment you have to know that at what time you have to stop, that's very important. Second,
Hmm.
if you don't have a, because every person is different, right? Not
Yeah.
everyone is a self realization, and I think very few people who have the self study, on self realization that what they are working, what things are not working. Most of the people don't, because they have been, because of the kind of world right now, there have been a lot of things to do it. That people got confused now what to do, because there were tons of things to do it, right?
Yes.
And the other thing, you have somebody around who you can speak, and they give you feedback that what should I
Yes.
do it, right? The
Yes.
two key takeaway, because these are the common for everybody, and I think these are the two important things which everyone can relate, right? But the most important part is like how, uh you know to study ourselves and to keeping further, and
Yeah.
writing a book, right? As you mentioned that you written
Yes.
that book, it's a hell of a time, right? I myself, if you ask me to do it, I said no, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to give up, that's it. But doing that thing also, you have to think a lot of like how you're going to manage your work, because this is you're doing for the community, because somebody might be helpful, right? Because you ultimately invested your time, that nothing but your contribution. People often
Hmm.
ask like how can you contribute, and people don't think that if they just pull some project, do a code or some, that's, I said, if even if you volunteer for any small event, or if you give a time to any of your fellow members being a discussion of that project, that also count as a contribution, because the biggest thing you contribute is your time, right?
Yes.
Just if,
That's true.
if you think that way. But there are again a different perspective, depend the who are the people who leading that project, because those are the person who can recognize it. And the second is, if they not recognize, you recognize yourself and just tell the people that how you did it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough, man. Writing a book, I guess. So once again, me being stubborn kind of helps and works in my favor sometimes. Like writing a book was one of those cases. Actually, writing a book for me was kind of interesting process because it was very me, myself, and I.
Okay.
Maybe until I had like a working version ready that I could show it to somebody so that I could get feedback on it, because I was there are a number of ways that you can write a book. You can write a book in public. Like, for example, right now, Luciano Ramalho, which is the author of Fluent Python, which is like one of the Python Bibles, I would say, is working on the translation of the second edition of Fluent Python on GitHub with the help from the community. They are translating parts of the chapters, and everything is on GitHub. So anybody that knows Portuguese could go in there and help translate. Not many people do, because it's a humongous task.
Right. Task.
Having time for doing those things is hard. It takes a long time. But Luciano Ramalho is doing that in the open. People are helping out. So I believe the translation is going to come out better and faster than having somebody that probably doesn't know Python as well do it, for example. So it takes a long time, and you have to be very patient with yourself. One thing that helps me, for example, in particular, because I'm a very impatient person, I'm very antsy, even though like I knit and I crochet, which is sounds like something that people have to have patience to do it, is actually, I would say, is more a stubbornness than patience. Is I break down the tasks as much as possible. So instead of writing one chapter, I say, write about the subtopic of that given chapter. Instead of writing and reviewing, I say, no, I'm just focused on writing today. I will review it another time. So all of everything that we do, it requires time, and you're going to have to give up a few things. So for example, the book that I released this year was not the book that I started writing. The book that I started writing is still sitting on my computer. It's still waiting to be finished. It's going to be finished eventually, but it was not the book that I released this year. The book that I released this year is a smaller version, very different from the first one that I started writing, that I still want to finish. It might look a little bit different from when I started. Yes, I'm a better writer now. So let's start there. Like, I'm better at writing today than I was 5 years ago when I started the first book. But my husband was mentioning this to somebody else the other day, and I didn't realize until he said something to somebody else, which is kind of funny thing to notice. He was explaining to somebody about you have to put some effort into it, make some hard choices. Some of his mentees, probably, he was talking about this. And people don't realize this because people see, oh, yeah, you gave a talk at the, like you, for example, Mehul, you gave a talk at the Taiwan, was it? In Taiwan for an event. But people don't know how long it took for you to take the visa, how long it took for you to prepare that talk, even though it might not have been like your best talk ever. People don't know how long you traveled to get there. So he was saying something to his mentee about, oh, Jessica just released this book, and people don't know. She was like the last stretch of releasing a book. She was 2 months in, working her normal hours at work from, I usually start working around 9, from 9 to 7 p.m. or something, with stops and breaks whenever I needed. But also, she was started working at 9 at work, but she would wake up early, she would have breakfast, and she would sit down on her computer to start reviewing parts of the content at 7 a.m. After she finished working, because she had like her meetings and podcasts and live streams and whatnot, she would make a break, have dinner or not. And then instead of sitting down and watching series, which I love to do in the night, don't get me wrong, reading my sci-fi books and my fantasy books and whatnot, instead of doing those, you would sit down and work on the book again from 7 to 10 to 11. Sometimes he was like, are you going to sleep today? And he was like, yeah, eventually. but it is hard choices, and most people don't realize you are having those hard choices and those hard conversations sometimes with you by yourself if you are, on your own, or sometimes you and your family if you have a family to take care of. So it is important and kind of self-help-ish, if you think about it, like for you to understand what are your limitations, how long you can keep doing those things. Not only I would do that on the normal weekdays, but also the weekends I wouldn't do anything else other than working on the book. I didn't watch most of my series for a very long time, and then I needed some time off of doing that, so I was working only, and waking up early because my body got used to waking up earlier than normal. But instead of getting up, I was like, I'm going to read my book, some sort of sci-fi book this time. Maybe Foundation because I'm watching the series again. So I need to read the books. But those kind of things, those kind of choices, most people don't see. And it is hard for people to understand that it's not a boot camp on writing, like, that is going to make you an author. It might make you an author, I don't know. But most of the time, most of the cases, it is not that that's going to make you a proficient writer. Is you putting the work and writing every day or for a long period of time. It might be faster than most people. It might not be as fast. It depends. Each situation is different. Each person is different. What works for you might not work for me, and vice versa. But yeah, it is a long process, and it takes forever to do these things. Most people don't realize it.
Makes sense what you said, but I'm I must say that, because I never gonna think of writing a book, to be very honest, more, because
You should
because
at least once think about it, and maybe decide that it's not your thing. That's fine, but you should think about it. It's a good
one
exercise, I would say.
yeah. So the only thing, to figuring out to manage your time, and since you do now a lot of activities, not if
Mhm.
you think this scenario, if it would be like 5 years, 6 years back, that is total different scenario. But at that time, we were not that mature enough to understand that this time we could do much more than this. I remember, few weeks back when I was doing a podcast with one of the developer advocate at Trust Test, and he
Mm.
told me, because he wrote 2 3 books, and I asked like him, man, how did you how did you wrote 2 3 books? It's insane. So he told me very, he's not told me some extraordinary things. He told me like, Mehul, do you write a blogs? Maybe yes, I do. So do you write any particular topics? I said, I most of the time I write, for example, if let's say talk about Kubernetes. So write
Yeah.
about Kubernetes, how to use that, what are the problems that I face. So I specifically write about if something is failed, if I fix it. So I write down the process, how to
Yes.
fix that one. So I do
Mhm.
that. So say, think about that you written in the 3 to 2 cities. Try to put in a syllabus structure, combine it, whatever you put it in a blog, put it the same thing, kind of syllabus, and that's it. Your book is done.
Exactly.
I said it's very easy to say for now because it's again because I don't know, again it's the same thing, right? You're writing a blog post, which is public. You're writing a book, it's a public. But trust me, when you think about writing a book for the same thing, you think a lot. You think a lot. I'm not sure, like when I think of write a book as a write a blog post, I don't think that much. I said I just wanted to share the solution. I wanted just to share the awareness. But when you write a book, we think a lot about how it is going to be, because in a human mindset, when you say you wrote a book, people think in a very different way, right? It's a human tendency, I would say, a human nature. Though
Yeah.
it's the same thing. What do you want to say on that?
I kind of agree with the developer advocate you interviewed. It's kind of the same process, actually, for me. Okay, so it is, if you think of, I'm going to write a technical book on
Uh-huh.
how to use Git, not GitHub, not GitLab, not Bitbucket, Git, the CLI tool. If you think about it, it's like, oh my God, where do I start? You start the same way you would start a blog post, like at least for me. You start with a
Mhm.
structure. Like my blog posts, It starts with like a note. Let's say the other day I was thinking like I had to change one repo, change from one organization to the other, and I had to rename the remote and redo the connections to the new repo, so the new path. I didn't know how to do that. So my blog post, I have a blog post that I will work on. I haven't started on yet. Was just the note of the two commands that I used to update the remote and the connection that I needed to use now for the new repo, the new location of the repo. That's my first step. So for the book, it was not that different to think about it, actually. And the way that I work, it was the same thing. Today, I use Notion to write the first draft of my books. Why? Because for me, creating a Notion database where I can follow along whether or not I wrote that piece of that subtopic inside of that chapter is easier to keep track of if I wrote it, if I reviewed it, if I need to create the images, because sometimes, most of the times, I write the things and then I come up with the images. Because if I start taking screenshots or trying to actually do the things and take the screenshots is harder. I write about the things that I know, as most people do. Like you just said yourself, like you found the solution, so you're going to write about the solution. It's the same thing. The only difference is instead of having that instant gratification of publishing a blog post because you started writing in the big morning, you reviewed it after lunch, and then you publish in the afternoon, you're not going to have that at that time. So you have to celebrate not publishing the blog post, not publishing that chapter, but finishing writing it, finishing reviewing it. So it's kind of the same process if you think about it. It's just sit down and instead of writing a blog post that you're going to publish, you're going to delay the publishing step for later. So I kind of agree that it's kind of the same thing. If you break it down enough, it's kind of the same thing. So, for example, for the book, I started with an outline, which were the commands that I wanted to cover for this one that I released, right? And it is like a dictionary of sorts. It's not like a book, like a story on, oh, you start here, you do X and Y, Z steps, and then this is the result. Let's recap what we did. No, it's a very dictionary-like book. This one is like, oh, how do you commit? How do you create a branch? How do you do X, Y, and Z? What I imagine people do when they get the book is they read through it the first time, and once they know what the content is, they will go back to it to consult on the commands they want to learn or they need to use or they don't remember how to use. The other book is more on a story, like tutorial vibes. It's like, oh, let's sit down together. What is Git? What is versioning? How can you use versioning in real life? Now that you understand this, let's dive into using versioning. Install it and, follow the steps we saw. Now let's create your first repo. This is how you do it. Let's create your project. Let's start with the README. Let's create the files. Let's commit the files, those kind of things. But you don't sit down and you just write the book. Some people do. Most like stories, people do, like when you write novels and whatnot. But technical books is actually like a collection of blog posts. So one of the things that I did, first things first, was writing the outline of thinking to myself, how would I teach somebody this? Let's write down what I want to teach people. So X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 A, B, C, D, and go like that. And after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on this first subtopic. Do I have anything that I read in that I can reuse? Copy, paste over to the page. Starting with a non-blank page helps. And doing that in Notion also helps because I can have one page per subsection instead of having like this long ass document. Sorry about that, but this very long document where there are a lot of things written and you don't fall into the trap of trying to write and review at the same time. You just write it and then you review. For me, I agree 100% that it's not much different than writing blog posts. It's just that you're going to be writing a lot of blog posts, not releasing them, and then putting them together. And you probably have to have the added step of reviewing everything, especially if, let's say, you don't have a lot of time to do that every day. So one thing that I realized when I was rereading the book after a while, the first one that I haven't published yet, is going to be published someday soon. I don't know when. It was that the person that wrote, like the Jessica that wrote the first chapter and the Jessica that wrote the fifth chapter, those very different Jessicas in the writing style, in the way of explaining things. And I have to pick one or the other to come back and say, I'm following this style, and I need to make adjustments to the writing that is on the page.
Okay.
I also have a tendency of repeating myself very, very much. And probably people hearing this are going to notice this. Sorry, I apologize. But the unscripted version of me, the person that didn't write a blog post about these things, is a very chaotic mind processing thing. So me in real life is very chaotic. If you watch my videos, you're going to say, oh my God, this person, is going to be ba, 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 and is going to say all the things right in the right time. Most of the time, my writing is very chaotic, and then I clean it up. Like most things that I do. My talks are like this, my blog posts are like this, my videos are like this. And it is a process. So everything, like I even wrote about this. I have a blog post on how I create content. So everything starts with the outline, then I fill the gaps in the outline, and then I review everything to make sure they make sense and that is not missing any information, that I don't repeat myself too much, that I have the images to support what is being spoken on the words, what is written. So yeah, I agree. It's a collection of blog posts that you write every day a little bit, and after that you put everything together. So I kind of agree with that perspective, because when people think, writing a book, oh my God, how long did it take?
Yes.
It took a long time, yes, but I did a little bit every day. I didn't do all at once. It was not like 3 years writing 10 hours a day, because nobody can do 10 hours a day. It's madness. You need to have breaks. You need to breathe. You need to have other experiences to improve what you are doing, and so on and so forth. It was maybe 10 minutes on a Monday, maybe 1 hour on a Friday, maybe 3 hours on a Saturday, and 5 hours of reviewing on a Sunday, because I'm not somebody that only writing is what pays the bills. I need to still work.
Agree.
And sometimes I will work more on a week. Sometimes I will write more on a week. Sometimes my work-life balance is a little bit different. So, for example, I haven't touched the book that I'm writing right now in 2 months because I've been traveling and work has been crazy, and I have working long hours for preparation for an event that was happening. So these things take time. But me understanding that that's okay, that's part of the process, that is going to get better. And I'll have, like, for example, my winter break from Christmas to New Year's, I'm probably going to sit down and write a little bit more than I would on a day-to-day. So, for example, in these 2 months that I'm traveling more, I'm not writing as much, and that's okay. I understand that's okay. But when I go back, I have my system of creating content, of my tracking system that I can go back to and say, oh, I already wrote the first chapter, so I don't even need to look at it. I can just focus on this little piece of content that I need to write. So it kind of helps that too. So, it is just writing a collection of blog posts, yes. But at the same time, you need to be disciplined, or not re-debating, rewriting everything all the time, of giving yourself time to write all of the things. And it's going to be crappy the first time and you can improve later. The worst part of writing is having the blank page. So I always start with the title to help out. And then I write everything that is on my head, even though it might not be good, even though it might need a lot of editing after. But it is writing a collection of blog posts.
and and you should be you should be lot of patience, right? You should
Yeah.
be so much patientful to throughout this process. And and yes, you're right. Uh, you mentioned couple of things so many times, and one of the things which I heard a lot about your podcast, right? And to the podcast, I want to ask you: are you a foodie? Like you like a food a lot?
Yes. Yes.
So
Eating is one of my favorite hobbies, and I do like to eat good food.
okay, so is that the reason also you named your podcast start with pizza?
So I guess for people that speak English, this might not make much sense, but like
Okay.
dice, so data in Portuguese
Mhm,
is dados,
mhm.
and dice is also dados. So if you look at the
Oh,
logo for the podcast, actually, it is a pizza with a little dice in it, as
right,
like would be cheese or something.
right.
So a little blocks of sheet of data. So the joke is the podcast actually started as a dictionary for data science terms in GitHub, built by the community back in Brazil. So you would
Okay.
say have, let's say, machine learning. So what
Mhm.
does mean machine learning in Portuguese, which is aprendizado de máquina? So you would have this dictionary plus a like little blurb of what it means to do machine learning. So to train models and whatnot.
Okay.
We would have. So the way that we did that project was Leticia started it. I helped manage the open source part of it, and then Leticia had the brilliant idea. Let's do a link instead of saying like a github.com slash leportela slash data science or whatever, or dictionary of data science or whatever. We bought a domain, as many developers love to do. We bought a domain, and the domain was datascience.pizza, because pizza is easy to remember, data science is easy to remember, everybody loves
Right.
pizza.
Of
you
course.
know and a good dictionary is always handy, as pizza is. So basically that's how the podcast started, as this project. And me and her and Gustavo were talking about, we should, because we already talked about this a lot, we were working with
Mhm.
data so much, and we wanted to share the content with other people. But for example, me, Leticia, and Gustavo, all the three of us are privileged to certain levels where we all speak English. We have understanding of English really well. In Portuguese, in Brazil, only 5% of the population speak English. So we wanted
Oh,
to help have good content, current content on data science in Portuguese for the people, the 95% of the people that do not speak English. So we are already discussing these things among ourselves. It's like we should discuss this in public, as we did the dictionary, as we help out with open source and those kind of things. So how can we do this? And Leticia, Gustavo, I were discussing, should we do a YouTube channel? And both me and Leticia like, no, I don't want to have my face on a YouTube. I don't want to manage a YouTube channel. So we came up with the brilliant idea of doing a podcast, because it's just audio. So that's fine. That's easy.
mhm.
Less of a pressure than having like our video and editing videos, which is none of us knew how to do. And we don't like hash cuts in video, where you have one face and then you have a cut and then you have another face. So it's like a podcast is easier. Let's do podcast. Okay, great. Let's do podcast. And so what is the name? And we already have data science.pizza. Why not have something with pizza? And then we like came up with a lot of ideas. And I said, like, why not Pizza de Dados, which is like data pizza,
Data
with
pizza, yeah.
everybody.
Toppings. A lot of
Yes.
data is like a toppings on the pizza, right?
Yes. And if you look at the logo, you have the little dice, which is also
Yeah.
data dados in Portuguese.
I saw that. I
Yes.
saw it.
So it kind of made sense.
And is that the first data science podcast in Brazil?
Yes, it was the first. 6 years ago, there were no data science podcasts in Brazil. That same 1 year after that, almost, the second one came about, which is hackers. they are still doing it too. So like they are 5 years old, Pizza is 6. And then a lot of other podcasts appeared with different ways of doing data science content. Uh, Also, not in only Brazil, we heard of Dados Tacos, I guess, which is from Argentina. So it's also tacos. Um, because the idea caught on and it continued. And people, there was one about data journalism that I don't remember the name now. But yeah, it was the first data science podcast in Brazil. And today, it is the only podcast about data science that is completely managed, edited, recorded by 100% women. So me, Ana Cecilia, and Leticia are the hosts. And we have an editor called Jessica, not me, another Jessica. So yeah, it is 100% women-based initiative or continued. So yes, it is. It is interesting to be the first one doing something, which is kind of weird to think about. Like, how could we have been the first to have this idea? I don't know, but it happened. So yeah, it's kind of funny. Yeah, so that's how the name came about. Like, made sense at the time, and it still does. And one of the questions that we ask everybody when they come on the podcast is who they are, what they do, and what's the favorite pizza. So we have a lot of pepperonis, a lot of margaritas, and some
Yeah.
other different flavors back in Brazil. We do pizza very differently. Italians would probably be angry at us. I apologize in advance, but yes.
I think you mentioned everyone everyone got the idea. Everyone, think about some point. The only thing is that when someone think and start it. So
Yeah,
everyone, I'm sure that a lot of people might got this idea, but not everyone wants to, give that time to start it, because
yeah,
that's very important, right? Because in a humankind these days, we kind of struggle with that a lot because we have a lot of things to do in our life. But one of the thing I would like to highlight, and kudos to the entire team, that you guys actually spreading the web literacy in the local language. And I would say
yeah,
not not so many people got aware of the power of localization, that nowadays every company, every organization wants their product or service to be localized in the local language so that it could spread everywhere in the world. People can use it, adopt it. One of the reason that people think, like, if our kind, if anyone asks you to translate into Portuguese, or let's say if anyone asks me to do Hindi or any other language, I would say it's take a lot of time, right?
it does.
To translate it, a lot of time. But there are so many people who are from the non-tech background. For them, it's really good opportunity, because there are tons of opportunity if you really contributed in the localization. I know so many of my friends who doing localization for Mozilla Firefox. Even I was the one who was managing the complete project. I'm still the manager, but I haven't translated any single string. But what I did, I just started that project and I just spread an awareness, and couple of people got a really good opportunity. Like some people got opportunity in Red Hat being a
Mhm,
localizer. And we earlier talked about Kubernetes as well, right? So
mhm.
recently Kubernetes started a localization project and now translated in every language. Recently they
Oh,
started in
nice.
India in, yes. So now they added Hindi language, and they also added sub content, like sub state language in the country. There's every state has a different language as well, right?
That's so
Similar like
cool.
in
Yeah.
Europe. So if companies like Kubernetes, the people who are managing the product, if they think of localization a lot, but the only thing I want to highlight here is it's a very long process. It's a very hectic,
It
a
is.
process to do it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you do that, there are tons of opportunities out there, and also you are helping the people to understand the same term but in the different language, because that's how. And I'm sure, like, for example, if you go to Brazil or any country, and if you found any Portuguese people, right, you might
Mhm.
going to talk to them in the local language instead of just using English, because that will be
Yeah.
very useful for them to understand or maybe help to convey your message. So what do
Yeah.
you want to say on that?
Okay. So localization is hard, but it's essential. I would say in a
Yes,
globalized
yes.
way. Especially if you think about, for example, how many AI startups are in the market now. There is a lot of tools for you to use to make localization easy. So for example, I have a friend that she has a master's in computer science, and she doesn't work with computer. She's actually a teacher. She's a teacher of English in Brazil, but she has a graduation and master's in computer science, which is kind of funny if you think about it. It's a diverse background there for you. And she actually does translations for a living. But there are also tools if you don't have the money to pay for translations, for somebody to translate and do the adaptation. You still can use those tools. So I'm going to give you two examples other than one from my friend that actually works with translations and translations of technical content. Two examples. One, my own. My book is in Portuguese and English, available for purchase. So you can buy either in Portuguese if you prefer, or in English if you prefer. I wrote the book first in Portuguese, and then I translated that into English. I didn't translate every single word myself. I use AI to actually get a working version of the translation, because that's faster than me typing out all of the phrases into English and everything else. So there are a lot of tools that can be used for translation that are really good now with like large language models, especially like any sort of GPT or whatever. So that is one example for you. And thinking of, for example, markets like Brazil, the last data we have, I already said that, I'm going to repeat it. 5% of the population speak English, and the rest don't. So if you want your product to be successful in Brazil, you probably are going to need some sort of support in the local language. The other example is also my own, but is broader than myself. You have LinkedIn Learning has libraries of learning content in multiple languages. English, Spanish, Portuguese, I guess Chinese might be another one, maybe French. I don't remember exactly, but I know Spanish, Portuguese for sure. I am also like a LinkedIn Learning instructor. So one of the works that I do is adapting courses that are in other languages into Portuguese. And I say adapting, not translating, which is different. So translating is word for word what that means. Adapting is bringing in cultural differences into the context of that company. So for example, United States might use American football references, yards and whatnot. I don't even understand, so I'm not going to go into that comparison. But Brazilians, we prefer what I call football, and most English people will call soccer. So that's one adaptation. So if I have a course that is teaching Python, the example is about yards and American football. Instead of doing yards and American football, I'm going to talk about soccer and, meters instead of yards and whatnot. And so those things are really important if you want to have a big database of users from a country that doesn't speak English. And I think this is fundamental. For example, if you talk about my book, I sold more copies in Portuguese than I did in English for multiple reasons. Git is easier for people that speak English because documentation is in English, the examples make sense in English. If not saying that Git is easy, far from it. I'm just saying that it's easier to understand in English than it is in Portuguese, because even though we have a translation for Portuguese of the documentation and whatnot, if you're using on the terminal like really fast and you're reading the helper on the terminal, the helper is not going to be in Portuguese, it's going to be in English. So sometimes understanding what is said, there is a barrier just because of the language. And there is a second barrier, which is the tool itself, which is not very easy to understand, right? Because, Git can be complicated depending on the scenario and what you're using. So I'm of the opinion that localization is hard, but if it's done properly, it can mean the world to the people that adopt your solution, that use your product. So you have to really think about it, if it makes sense or not, and if it does, put an effort into it. So I'm going to give you another example just because I remember this. I use Python, right? And all of the documentation for Python, it has a Portuguese version of it. And do you know who translated those versions for Portuguese? The Python community in Brazil. So we have translations because the community translates those. There are work groups within the Python Software Foundation that are focused on translations. One of them for Portuguese is actually managed by a friend of mine, Marco Rouget, who works out of Dublin today for Amazon. And he manages the translation group. So he helps out with like making sure that the localization tool is up to date, that the versions are shipped once they are done. So you have like translation efforts in various languages for Python, for example, and other languages too. So there is a need for having the content in your own community. And just a final example is there are some communities, and I'm going to give you the example of Japanese, that much like Brazil, don't speak as much English. Like they know English, but they prefer to absorb content in their own language, in their own culture. So doing those adaptations to Japanese is really important for your product to be well accepted within that culture. So all of those things, in a way, I say Japanese. Next week I'm going to Japan. I don't know when this podcast is going live, but I'm going to Japan for PyCon APAC and Dev Day Japan. I do not speak Japanese other than arigato gozaimasu, which is thank you very much. Be thankful to people. And sushi, which I love eating. So that part I know really well. Of course, unagi, uni, love it. But other than those two, I don't speak much Japanese. But I'm going there to support my colleague Daisen, that works in Japan and is doing a developer day, and we are sponsoring PyCon APAC, which is going to be in Tokyo. And even though I do not speak Japanese, Daisen is making a great effort of helping with localization for content for those events and having the Japanese version of it, because we know from experience, both me with Portuguese, him with Japanese, and being in Japan, so even more important there, that having the content there in Japanese is going to be better for the experience of the developers we are trying to reach and help with identity solutions. So yeah, localization is important. And I would even say adaptation for the local culture is even more important. But yes, people do prefer to use their own mother tongue to understand and absorb information.
I think, and that's the best way to even build a trust as well. I still remember when I used to
Yes.
travel to European countries. Not every European countries actually speak English. Couple of like Czech Republic and the other couple of cities where I traveled. So I used to use Google Translate, and I used to communicate.
Yeah.
And when I was in Italy, so I started my talk by say Vegunde India. Hi, this is Mehul. Vegunde India means I'm from India. So
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to build a trust when you try to give efforts and try to communicate in their local language. So people respect the people also, that can trust also build, and they also listening to your what you're trying to say. So
Yeah.
look, languages plays a very important role. And even if you are not able to, for example, if you ask us to do it, that it's a kind of tedious task, but it better for us to at least aware in our community, because there are a lot of people who can do it, since they are kind of I struggle into this horizon, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
better because I myself got to know about the Kubernetes during this podcast only, when one of the Docker captain told, because he was maintainer for the project, and he told me that Kubernetes now is in, they started localization. So it's
Oh, that's
amazing
so
thing, right?
nice.
So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so that's the best thing. So being a developer advocate, because for us it's very easy, since we constantly talking with the community, for us it's very easy to share. But yeah, talking about community talk, because developer advocacy has a lot of things, like people Nowadays, people think in a very different way. For example, the person who traveled a lot, those are the developer advocates. Person who speaks a lot, those are the developer advocates. And people
Yeah.
who have a great, you can say great presence on the social media, they are the developer advocate, and they are trying to build their profile in such a way which which sometimes they may fail because that's not really they want to do it. The only reason they do it because they might be looking at some person and they try to build their profile in such a ways. So have you come across this kind of a thought, or maybe this kind of horizon where uh, since now companies also hiring this kind of position where developer evangelist, developer advocate, platform advocates, community managers, right? So what do you want to say on that? That uh, is this just a social media impression in this sense, or is just there are other ways? Because I know a lot of people who are not on social media but they have a huge impact in the community.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Okay. So that there are two sides of this. It might be like a hot take. I don't believe that you need to be a big presence in social media to do developer advocacy well, because there is so much into the developer relations world that you need to do, that you can do for your community, that you don't necessarily need to be front stage. I would say you can be backstage for doing it. So, for example, I'm going to bring up the example of my friend Marco Rouget. Rouget works with the translation group. You don't see Rouget going to events and giving talks, but the impact he has by helping people translate, and even translating himself, the documentation from Python to Portuguese in Brazil is huge. A lot of people don't even know that this is how translation is done for Portuguese. Some people will do because they want to figure out and help out. Some people do not care for it. They just need to use the documentation in Portuguese, and that's fine. Everyone has a different need, and everyone has a different itch they need to scratch, I would say. So social media will help in the first instance, but it comes more about how can you help your community of choice. For me, it's the Python community. So for me, it is helping organize the PyLadies meetup here in Toronto, where I live. Help organize and find and sponsor events like PyCon APAC that are a little bit smaller than PyCon US would be, for example, or PyCon UK that I went to in September, and even figured out, for example, sponsorship packages that, for me, which is really important, diversity in the community. So PyCon US has, for example, a luncheon of the PyLadies where PyLadies just get together, have lunch together, and so on, and you can sponsor that. So developer advocacy has so much more, so much more before you have the social media. Social media helps because if you have a great reach, you're going to have more numbers. I would say like this, and sometimes that is necessary depending on the work and where you work. But I would say I can see, for example, people like Andrea Chiarelli, where I work with. It is from the .NET community. He does amazing work writing blog posts. He created the .NET templates for Auth0. So basically, templates where you can spin up a website. Auth0 is already configured for you. You don't even have to configure anything. You can just focus on building the website itself, like what you want for features. And if you look at the numbers of followers that Andrea has, it's not that big. And that is not to say that Andrea doesn't have an impact in the community. If I talk to people in the .NET community, which I have done, people know, oh yeah, especially the ones that are talking about identity. Oh yeah, I read a blog post from Andrea that explained whatever topic it is. So I would say social media might help depending on what you are doing, depending on who you are trying to reach, but it's not the whole thing. It That is much. For example, when we talk about DevRel, people think, oh, it's just traveling, going to events, right? I was like, no. When you come back, you need to fill reports. You need to tell developer stories. You need to capture feedback on the tools that people are using, the products, especially if you are working as a developer relations for a company. Most of the times, they want to learn something in return. You'll need, it's not only like about, oh, how can I make my product better because I want to sell more, but it's better because it's going to help others more easily. So, for example, let's say I'm going to a Python conference, presenting on how to use MFA or how to use passwordless. Let's do passwordless because I had to help somebody with this the other day. So let's say I'm doing a tutorial on how to do passwordless. We are using Auth0 to do it. And there is a portion there where you can create an Auth0 account and you're going to activate passwordless. But the focus is explain what passwordless is and how they can implement integration with a tool. We are using Auth0, but it could be any other tool that does passwordless. And they understand why is that important. Why is passwordless important? What things I should be looking for in the tools that I'm using to make sure that it serves my customers well. So those kind of things are more important and goes beyond social media. When you apply for a call for papers, people are not interested in how many followers you have on Twitter. People are interested in what you have to contribute to the attendees, what the attendees are learning from you, what you have to say that is going to make somebody's lives better, even if it is a little bit because they learned something new from you, right? So yeah, there is a lot of it that might be social media, especially on controversial topics. But for me, I don't have a big following, to be honest. I guess I have less than 8,000 people on Twitter, and I don't even post that much anymore and those kind of things. But I do Twitch. I also don't have like a lot of people watching my Twitch live streams, and that's okay because the things that I tweet, like I do live streams about, it's not for everybody, you know. But I'm helping other people in different ways. So for me, the best thing that happens is when somebody tags me in a tweet or somebody that had a problem with Auth0 or identity or something else, and they need help understanding that, and then we talk it out, and that person, oh, I figured out now what I did, what went wrong. So for me, that's the best case. Like I love helping people out in that sense. So developer advocacy at its core, it's helping people out, and by helping people out, of course, you're going to help also your company. You know, for example, identifying gaps in the documentation, identifying improvements on development toolkits, and so on and so forth. Social media will help, but it's not the only thing out there. It depends on your type of developer,
Right.
that developer you're trying to reach and help.
Right. And it's more about people are very fascinated of social media. People are. I still remember when I was working for my last organization, they used to think a lot. Like I suggest them to be more active on Twitter, and I propose them to let me do, because I was the developer advocate,
Mhm.
and I said they said you handle our Twitter account, like you post. I'm like, I do that because we used to have a constant event. In fact, let's post over there, tag them, have communicate. I did that, and there were just two like. My manager actually deleted that tweet in the week. I said like, why you deleted it? So there's no such impression. Because Twitter is not that platform, right? To see how many people reached. It's all about how much, even if let out of 10 people to see that, and how much what kind of content you're producing. It's not about spreading your message, what you're doing over there.
Yes.
So there are companies also there who think of, but yeah, gladly I just worked for that company 6 months and I left that company. But yeah, I because they think social media, because I said developer advocacy kind of thing. Every company, every product service, I think is a very different sense. So
Yeah.
even I was little shocked while thinking that approach in a mind. I said, no, this is not the something, because the project is not required a social media presence. The project is itself very impactful, right? Because
Yeah.
I was actually contributed to the project. But then the only thing, I was not able to, communicate the same to the people I used to work with. So they were
Yeah.
not in that, to think that, okay, this is not important. Other impact is important for our project. So I was not
Yeah.
able to convey the message. So at the end, I just left that organization and move forward. So this is the reason I specifically asked this question. And let me just ask last two questions. It will be
Okay.
very, I want to ask a lot of, but maybe I want to do another podcast for that. Uh, but yeah, so let's say if since you transit from your career from the one of biomedical to the completely different. Let's say if anyone wants to transit from the any other category of the work that they're
Mhm.
doing right now to the developer advocacy, right? So what are the five advice that you're going to give to them?
Be patient. do I guess I would say like do so slowly.
Yes, yes,
Slowly
right.
build the confidence of speaking in public if you want to speak in public. Slowly build the confidence of publishing blog posts if you want to be a writer, like write technical documentation, writing blog posts or whatever. There is a space for a lot of different backgrounds. For me, like take me for example, I have a very diverse background to my colleagues. Most of my career was in data science. I did software development for a while, but most of my career was in data science. And even though data science was a little bit different in Brazil than people were used to seeing in the United States, and my company is from the United States, even though we are global and we have a lot of people from the United States. So even like explaining to the HR department when I was interviewing, oh yes, I'm a data science, but I'm a bit different from what you heard. So I didn't only do statistics, I did development as well, and I put things in production as well. So those kind of things was like, oh, interesting. So most skills transfer, communication skills transfer, um, the ability to explain, like you're saying, explain what you did, why you did it. Uh, this is important, so you can start practicing those skills from developer advocates, explaining complex topics in an easier way for people to understand in different publics, in different levels of knowledge. This is important, and you can start practicing today. Being able to write a couple of papers, if you want to speak, you can start practicing today. Being able to record a video, if you want to be on the video production side, you can start doing today. Maybe record one a week, one a month. Start practicing the skills now, but do so slowly. You're not going to learn everything from, oh, I woke up today, I want to be a developer advocate. I'm going to learn everything today, and tomorrow I'll be a developer advocate. That's not how this works. So find the things that you like to do, whether that is writing, giving talks, and starting to do those slowly. For me, when I say today what I did and what I talk about the things I did and do, people say, "Oh, but that's a lot." Yes, that's a lot if you try to do everything all at once. But everything I did, it started very slowly. I first started doing talks at a conference. I first started going to the meetups, and then I started writing the blog posts after a while, and then I started having a podcast, and then so is have patience with yourself and do everything slowly, because otherwise you're just going to go crazy and get a burnout, and we do not want people to burn out. So be patient and do things slowly. It's going to be better, trust me. And after a while, those things are going to build your skill set, is going to build your confidence, is going to build your ability to defend your skills to others, and start interviewing. The first thing you want to do is start interviewing, because interviewing and doing like processes for other companies will help you most of the time figure out what is missing from you. Some companies do those kind of feedbacks after you interviewed and didn't get through. Sometimes you might be more ready than you know, depending on the type of work that you do. You might already have the skills there, and you just need someone to, take a chance on you, like Auth0 did for me. I already did talks, I already had a podcast, I already wrote, I was already part of a community of my community of choice. Companies will differ in what they need from the developer advocate. So yeah, take it slow, be have patience and start building those skills, because I guess that's the first thing you will want to do if you are thinking about career transition. And then you can start, by slowly building those skills, you're going to start slowly building your portfolio and making it easy for people to see, oh, maybe this person needs a chance on doing what we do and those kinds of things. So yeah, that's my advice.
This is going to help me as well, because uh,
Take notes.
of course, I'm taking it anyway. And one of the things also to highlight about the one of the great program that are part of Auth0 Ambassador, right?
Mm-hmm.
Auth0 Ambassador program has a huge impact on my life, because I started my journey as an open source contributor from Mozilla Firefox,
Nice.
and now I am one of the council member in Mozilla. So that was, but the sad part is this
Mm.
month that program got officially shut off, and we were the
Mm.
last council member, like leadership team. But yeah,
Oh,
great time. I learned a lot. Almost 10 years, I would say that.
that's nice.
But but Auth0 Ambassador program, like it's been 6 years. I'm part of this program, and the kind of you can say platform exposure that I got is just because of the program. I spoke to a lot of people, and I improved a lot. As I said, my first international talk that I gave, and that was on serverless authentication with JWT. That was the topic, and and after that, I almost presented Auth0 in almost 10 plus conferences around the
Nice.
globe. And because in the initial time, the program was just so active, and I came out to be one of the most active ambassador, got listed in their they at the time they used to write a Medium blog post about the program, the updates and achievements. I just wanted to know, since I am little off from like it's been a 1 year, I'm not that much active, right? I wanted to know, since you actively, I'm is constantly in my email getting a pop up that you taking a session, right? And you are one of the most frequent person to I see, constantly sharing technical knowledge through the ambassador program, right? And all the
Mm.
ambassador, and that's the one of the best part that I like, that we are educating our fellow ambassadors. So wanted to
Mm.
know that what is the future plan, that if you know what are the future plan, that because so many people want to join this program, trust me, in
Mm-hmm.
Twitter and LinkedIn, so many people ping me that, hey Mehul, tell me how to join this program, and I can say hundreds of the reason to join the program, but it was like few years back, and that my scenario is different now. So what do like in the future, what is the Auth0 Ambassador program goals, if you know, if you can share?
I know a few things that I cannot share, and
Okay.
but there are things that I can. And one of the things is we continue to look for people that are active in their communities, that are helping foster their identity board, I would say, through their communities. Uh, the Ambassador program is going through changes on how the program works, as most software does too. So that is continuous development and continuous integration and continuous work. So we are always improving the program. But one of the things is for people that are interested in the program, subscribe to the Auth0 developer newsletter that we have, Zero Index. Any news about the program will come out probably in the newsletter first. So you'll probably will hear from there. It comes out once a month. I'm going to share the link so Mehul can put it in the description of the episode.
I mean,
And I would say is if you are interested in the program and want to be part of it, is start making content on identity, because that's one of the main traits of people that are active in the program is they are sharing about identity, because everything that everybody does today requires information about who they are, where they are, information about the users, right? So identity is a big part of how you define who the user is, if they have the right conditions, and so on and so forth. So if you want to be part of the ambassador program and you don't know how to right now, because for example, right now we're not accepting applications, and we have windows when we accept applications, or we want to have people in. For you, Mehul, if people are talking to you and there's somebody that is very active in the community and they do talk about identity, you can always refer them to Christy. Christy's always looking at profiles, or to me, or to any of the other Auth0 advocates. For people that are listening in on this and want to be part of the program and want to talk to us, the advocates in Auth0, you can. And we will guide you through the process if it is a good fit. But yeah, start working on your identity content, start being part of the community and talking about SSO, MFA, and JSON Web Tokens, and all of those goody parts of identity, because that's what we mostly look for in people that are going to be ambassadors for Auth0. To share about identity. If you share about Auth0, even better, because ambassadors are the voice, part of the voice of Auth0. Like us developer advocates are the voice, but we are not everywhere all the time. So we rely on the ambassadors to help us foster the community, to help us identify gaps in the documentation. You are probably one of the first persons that try things out together with the developer advocates to give feedback to the product teams that we have within Auth0. So start working on the identity skills, I would say, and sharing those knowledge with your communities. That's, I guess, the one tip for the program. And the program is changing for the better, in my opinion. We are going to have a few changes coming. Those I cannot talk about, but Chrissy is going to be sharing those with the ambassadors very soon, if I'm not mistaken. But we are always looking to improve. So actually, I'm going to give the answer back to you, like the question back to you, Mehul. What would you like to see with the program? Send me a DM on Slack later. I would love to hear more, and you can talk it out.
Yeah, sure. I already, I constantly talk to Sam a lot, and I already gave suggestions, and some of the suggestions are already implemented, but a few are not put, since there are a lot of transition between Auth0 to Okta, transition phase, a lot of things didn't came out good. But yeah, I personally love that program, and in fact I referred 6 to 7 people in the program who are already there in the program right now, and this is the best program to be very honest to go for. The best thing that you're going to come over here is not you are not going to create not get a lot of social media following, but yeah, you going to upscale your technical expertise for sure, because here the constant thing that we see, like the ambassador also teaching other ambassadors, the developer can also constantly try to upscale the existing ambassadors. So all in all is required the passion for the security, I would say that, and a little bit knowledge. There they will help, the program is help shape you and upscale you and give you a platform to showcase ourselves. I think this is the mission, and this is the mission that I really admired. And I people who knows, they already know that how much I upscale and how so I love that program, and I glad that I part of it, to be very honest. And of course, by the time change is required, right? And all the change is always better. And things is good that everyone is taking so passionately, And since you mentioned Christine, I would like to say thanks to Christine, because
This is great. Yeah, she's the program manager. Yeah.
Yes, and awesome. And one of in and the last Dev Days that we attended, I lost my passport, and she was the one who stick to me, and I told her, like, and she told me, don't worry, we'll find out wherever. Like, we called a cab, Uber driver, everyone, and then I told her, can we go to the reverse way and try to see where I was, and let's search all the locations. And we both together, we hunt for my passport, and we found out at the airport in some dark area which no one knows, and I got it. And Christy told me, and I told her that she's so happy that I found my passport. We went through a lot of areas. We asked even the immigrant officer as well, and they also didn't have an idea. Then we tried to look for all the information centers, and we got it. And one of the things in recalling my mind that I came for an identity conference, I lost my identity and I got my identity. What is the best way to, portray in that way that I lost my identity, and it's very important. Like how much identity is important for anybody, right? And we are
Yeah.
trying to build a virtual identity, helping them to, manage everything in one single place, right? So, a huge thanks to Christy, right, for you.
Yeah.
So this one is for you.
Yeah, Chris is great. Chris is, yeah. I
She's a,
remember because we had like a dinner on that day when Mehul
yes.
arrived, and we were like, "Oh my God, Mehul lost his passport. We need help." And Chris is like, "No, I'll take care of it." And then she went and walked around all over, and then you finally got to the dinner, and you're like, "Oh, you found your passport!" And everybody was super happy, like extra happiness all around,
Yes.
because you lost it, but you found it. Everything was fine. But yeah. Um,
And the
we
best
love
part is,
having you, Meho, too.
and the best part, next day when we attended the conference, everyone recognized me. Oh, you are the one who lost your passport, right? I said yes.
It's a memorable thing. You have to
It's a
capitalize on
memorable
it.
thing. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
So
That's
great. I
true.
had a great, yeah, yeah, amazing team, to be very honest. Amazing to be part of, and
Oh, thank you.
I glad that I could contribute. As initial days I was so active, I'm trying to be more active, to be very, because this program has so much things to deliver. It's changed a lot of things in my career perspective, and also as a personally I evolved a lot. So I think it's going to be impact the others' life as well. So I'm highly recommend everyone to just stay tuned. Application is closed right now, as far as I know. Once it's
Yeah, it
open,
is.
just stay tuned, and we're going to share all the links in the description. And thank you, Jess. I had a great time. I'm sure. I hope you had fun, right?
I had fun. It was good. It was good.
But yeah, you have to promise that we are going to have another podcast where you just want to talk
Of
about
course.
the specifically about being a presenter, being a speaker. What are the things that, because it's very important being a developer advocate, how you can impact when you go on the stage, and sharing the topics that you're presenting. So how to interact, how to communicate, how to engage. That's very important, right? So that's something
Hmm.
that we are going to have a separate podcast for that.
Great. I'm down. Sign me up. Let's schedule and let's record it.
Awesome, awesome. So thank you everyone who watching this one. And
Thank you,
one important
everyone.
thing, yes, and one important thing that, to summarize this, don't think, just do it. That's very important. And second is, don't forget to share all the awesome thing they're doing it, because that is also important. Just share it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And thanks again, Jess, for coming, and thank you everyone for watching it.
Thank you, everyone.